So, good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Summerfield, and I'm the senior pastor at Zio Church, and we are super thrilled that you're joining us this evening for part 4 of our series, Living Well in Pandemic Times. We're going to just wait just a moment or so for a few more people to join us. And if you're watching this later, then we hope you're going to find it really, really helpful. We've had just a fascinating and inspiring journey. We've got one more of these Living Well in Pandemic Times sessions, which is next Sunday at 7:30, where we'll be looking at the challenges for parents. Like, parenting has been completely reframed during these last 6 or 7 months. And so we've got Stephen Becker-Legg, who are going to be joining us and giving us tips for parents to keep on keeping on in the midst of all of the challenges we face. But tonight is a different subject, and I'm super excited to invite my very good friend, Mr. Paul Meacham, who is going to guide us through this evening's subject. But before we get to that, Paul, why don't you introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So I live in Hitchin with my wife, Sarah, and our very hungry cat, Sam. I've been coming to Zio, trying to work this out today. I think it's for about 10 years now.
Yeah, it must be at least that. I agree, yeah.
But my day job is being engineering manager on the ExoMars rover, which is a 6-wheeled vehicle that will launch to Mars in 2022.
Yeah, and I mean, I always feel when you say that with kind of such humility. And when I drive to the Stevenage Leisure Park, and I see that massive building with the Mars rover on the side, and think, like, my friend Paul is literally part of the team, taking a big leadership role in the team, who are devising a robot that is going to ride around on Mars. That's kind of mind blown. And but the thing is, like, that's great. But tonight we're going to talk about money. So please tell me how Mars and money connect.
Well, I think my personal journey with financial well-being started when I was actually going to university for the first time, and I felt really, really homesick, and nothing felt normal or comfortable. So managing my student loan, which is obviously my primary form of income at that time, and working out how much I'd need for food and living expenses and leisure, it gave me a sense of control over my life that was otherwise lacking at that time.
Right.
And then more recently, I've been sort of running the CAP Money course at the Zio Church, which provides a practical way and practical tools to help people get on top of their finances long before their situation might lead into more serious things like debt.
And in fact, a lot of that wisdom is what we're going to be sharing tonight, isn't it? Like,
absolutely.
In abbreviated form. But this subject is super important. These 5 themes that we've been looking through over these series, we've looked at relationship challenges and marriages and friendships. We've looked at emotional well-being, and tonight we're looking at financial pressure, because we know for a whole bunch of reasons anyway, people can feel financial pressure, but it's amplified right now. Like, give us some headlines of the kind of pressures that people may be feeling when it comes to finances right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Financial health is an important topic at any time, but the current pandemic has made things a lot more pressured for some in our community. We're seeing businesses being forced to close, people furloughed, and the government is having to put increasing amounts of money into propping up our economy. So some of the main challenges are around debt payments, because of course these don't stop just because people aren't working or are furloughed. And in fact, some creditors will be more desperate to retrieve the money they're owed because of their own financial situations not being particularly good. There's a lot of reduced income, so obviously it's very well known that people are furloughed, but even those who are working and are able to keep on working have seen salaries being frozen and bonuses not being paid, or reduced hours available. And of course, things like self-isolation and shielding have meant that some people who would otherwise be able to work can't for periods of time and may not have sick pay to cover it. In the worst cases, we've seen job losses, that people just simply lost their jobs due to COVID. I know that obviously for the company I work for, being part of the aviation sector, that's been one of the worst hit, and there's been huge numbers of redundancies in aviation. And then finally, scams. vulnerable people are being targeted. Sometimes these are actually directly related to COVID, but other times they're just more dangerous than normal because people are having financial difficulties and may fall for something just to help them out of a difficult situation. But that's not to say it's all bad. I mean, for some, working from home has actually reduced their expenditure because there's less sort of leisure activities, holidays are not happening. So there might actually be, in some cases, more opportunity for saving and home improvements and things like that. But regardless of how the pandemic has affected you personally, good financial practices are essential to implement and maintain at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as we talk about this subject tonight, as we have on all of the things we've talked about, the last thing any of us need is dollops of guilt and shame. And that's not what tonight is about. Like we know, even personally, how easy it is to kind of get into financial trouble. Or like, I remember years and years ago, I was trying to sell my car, and I took this phone call, and you know, this company that was like, you know, we got 5 people, we've seen your car advertised over here, we got 5 people who want to buy your car, and I thought, wow, this sounds amazing, this sounds great, and you know, it's just going to cost this much, and I paid it, and then I never heard from them again. I thought, I can't believe that I've been scammed. I can't believe, you know, I've seen those things, you know, and you think, oh, that will never be me. Yeah. But actually, we can all be scammed sometimes when we least expect it. We can all, you know, find ourselves in situations beyond our control, like losing our jobs. We could all sometimes make bad financial decisions. What we don't need is to feel bad about that. And so we hope that tonight will bring some hope, and it will be bring some practical help to find a way through, because we emphatically want to say to people, whatever situation you're in, even if you are in chronic debt right now, and we'll talk a little bit later about some ways out from that, but there is always a way out. There's always a way out. There is always a way out. And we're hoping that tonight will help, and we'll point you to some other things that will help you too. And so that's our real hope and prayer for tonight, that it will bring some hope and bring some help, really practically, really, really simply, whatever situation you find yourselves in. And so we're going to jump through a whole bunch of Meacham wisdom on finances. So over to you, Paul. Hit us with number one. What's going to really help us?
Yeah, so tip number one is quite simple. It's make a budget. So okay. I can almost hear the groans from here, but the truth is that the budget is it's the foundation of good money management. And in simple terms, it just means listing all your current income and your current expenditure and making sure it balances. So when we say things like income, we mean things like salary, pension, benefits, as well as other income that's sort of existing on a regular basis. So, for example, you might have an eBay business that provides you some low level of income, but that should absolutely be included too. And then expenditure, being the larger part of the budget, is sort of all the things that are going out. So you can broadly divide them into things like home, living expenses, travel, family and pets, leisure, future needs, giving, and debt repayments. Now, normally when you form a budget, it's normally good practice to form it over the period which fits best with your income.
Right.
So, for example, if you're paid weekly, it might make more sense to do your budget over a typical week. But if you're paid monthly or 4 weekly, then set up the budget over that time period. So you just match it to the period of income, if you like. So for most people, this will be a monthly budget, and this will therefore make the most sense. But some expenditure will still need to be calculated for an average week, and then multiplied by this magic factor of 4.3 to get the average monthly spend. 4.3 corresponds because some months have 4 weeks and some have 5, and overall the average month has 4.3 weeks in it. So it allows you to essentially average that out.
Right.
So,
okay.
I mean, depending on how consistent your income is, and indeed it's not a bad idea sort of across the board, it may be necessary to record your income and outgoings over a period of time to get an average. This is particularly relevant if you're self-employed, where your income does tend to oscillate a bit. You don't want to build your budget against the worst or the best time. You want to have a sensible average that everything is based on.
Yeah, and of course that's also a bit seasonal, isn't it? I don't know about your utilities and stuff, but I find like my utilities bills are adjusted at different times in the year. And so obviously kind of gas and electric tends to be much less in the summer because I don't have the lights on as much, I don't need the heating. But in the winter, like it can more than double. And so in the course of even a year, I'm aware of those fluctuations. And as you're saying, like I certainly have found like how important it is to actually track against that budget, actually what is happening. I can remember in the past just putting a budget together and just thinking that's roughly what I'm going for. But I've tried to now. My wife laughs at me, actually. I've got a little kind of table, little Excel spreadsheet, type thing. But every week I just try to take 5 or 10 minutes every single Saturday morning. And I check my bank and just think, okay, what have I actually spent mapped against those kind of different budgets areas? And what was useful and really important about that is there were certain things, even like our weekly shopping bill, where we budgeted a certain amount of money, and then through tracking I realized that actually we were spending way more than that. And so really had to think about like, is that what we really do need to spend, in which case I need to adjust other areas, or actually do we need to kind of cut back on our expenditure? And so absolutely, point number one, like have a budget, but would really encourage people to track against it to see whether your expectation actually matches reality, because that helps us keep track and know if we need to adjust. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there needs to be a degree of honesty and realism. Otherwise the budget just won't work and the whole thing will come crashing down. So it's important, as you say, to be tracking it against real spend, but also just to be honest about what you're spending on certain things. And that's where the monitoring helps with that.
And that monitoring then can bring us to our second tip, which is?
So it's 3 things: cut costs, cut back, and cut out.
So that word cut is pretty big here.
Yes, cut various things. Because it might well be we formed our budget and we find that it doesn't balance. Now I must stress that this is not a negative. We've identified a problem that already existed. And because we know about it, we can do something about it. So in some cases, you might be able to increase your income, but it's much more likely you're going to need to reduce your expenditure. So cutting costs simply means let's do things cheaper. So for example, if you do your weekly shop at Harrods, switching to Aldi is going to provide you some pretty significant savings.
It surely will.
But also, if you've got a contract, as most of us will have these days, for a mobile phone or TV or broadband or something like that, it's worth checking if you're in the minimum contract term, because it's in the company's interest to keep you under contract, because it provides them with a known and reliable source of income, and thus it's quite possible there may be offers available to sign a new contract, to give you a new minimum contract term if you've gone outside of the initial one. And of course, it's always worth shopping around, and we're very fortunate in these days of so many sites that allow us to easily compare different things. But it's always worth making sure that there isn't short-term gain, long-term pain. So there's not an introductory offer that sounds wonderful because you're saving 50%, but actually in the long term that expires after a few months, and then the long-term pain kicks in where it jumps up to an amount we can't afford.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we've just switched our utilities, and we had just come out of the kind of as you say, the kind of fixed contract bit with the people that we were in, and we went to some Uswitch sites and realized that if we did switch our utilities provider to a good and reputable provider, and that actually we could save like £20 to £25 a month. That's like £300 a year by just making that shift. That's, and so by looking at these things, then as you say, there definitely are some ways of making changes. Give us those 3 things again. It was?
So cut costs, cut back, and cut out.
Cut costs, cut back, and cut out. And so cut out sounds a little bit tough. Like, what are the kinds of things that we could cut out? I get the cut costs and kind of get cut back, but cut out, seriously?
Yeah, the truth is that cutout is not going to work most of the time, because it means that just stopping doing something. So there might be one, maybe two things in your budget where you could realistically just stop doing them. So if you had a gym membership that you know you don't use anymore, or actually it happens that it's cheaper to pay for something when you need it rather than having a regular amount. So I found this when I used to have a membership card to a cinema, and I pay for it on a monthly basis. And I think I had to go something like 19 times a year in order for it to pay for itself, to actually be worth it. And the reality was, by the end of it, I was going half that much. So it was much cheaper for me to pay when I needed it, when I actually wanted to go out and watch a film, rather than having this regular amount coming out, not adding value. So the reality is that it's much more likely we're going to be able to cut back rather than completely cut out.
Yeah. So
this just means reducing the frequency at which we do something. So if you know you've got a bit of a coffee habit and you buy a coffee from quite an expensive place once a day, it might be worth looking at reducing this to maybe every other day.
Yeah.
The idea is not to make yourself a martyr here, but by deciding your priorities and figuring out which are less important, there might be some savings to be had that way. So cut back is a bit more realistic than cut out, I would say.
And like my wife is an amazing cook, amazing at shopping and getting kind of food and various bits and bobs. I mean, there are things that we can do when we go to shop, that we can shop in a way that's better value than maybe kind of buying certain things that seem they make things easier for us, but actually they're much more expensive. And so part of this could be the joy, quotes, of learning how to cook a variety of meals. And again, we're also blessed today that there are so many websites and YouTube things that can show us how to do stuff. And so we don't have time to get into everything today. But if you go on YouTube, you search on Google about affordable ways of shopping for food and all of those things, then again, that stuff can help with the cutting back too. So Paul, that's two things. So we've got a thing about cutting, we've got things about budget and monitoring. Number 3, top tip.
So it's about having separate accounts for regular payments, savings and spendings.
Okay.
So what we're talking about here is current accounts. So whatever happens, we need to make sure that our money is not tied up. But the truth is, most of us will only have one of these. We'll have one current account and everything goes into that and everything comes out of it. And it can be quite difficult as a result to separate what our money is for within that single account. So one of the ideas is to have at least three different accounts divided into regular payments. So this is our sort of primary account. It's the one that all the income goes into. But it's also the one where any standing orders or direct debits, which are all regular payments, will come out.
That kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. So you should always have enough money in that to cover those regular payments, which of course you can use your budget to determine. The savings account is an expenditure account essentially, but it's part of your expenditure will be things you are saving towards, or you'd like to start saving towards. So you've got these as line items in your budget, just like everything else, and then you're setting up a standing order to transfer that amount to a dedicated savings account or accounts each month. So it might be you want to have multiple different accounts for all the different things you're saving towards. So one might be for a holiday, one might be for a house deposit. You can do it however works practically, but the idea is that you're putting the savings into a dedicated place where it's harder to access them, essentially. And then the spending account is the most critical one, really, and what underpins this. So from your budget, you can work out what your average weekly spend is, and then you set up a weekly standing order to transfer that amount into this dedicated account. So that way your regular payments and your savings are protected, but you're also not giving yourself all the spending money in one go. And that way you can be quite disciplined with it. It's really important to make sure that account doesn't have an overdraft, because what we're looking for here is to set up the concept of once that spending money is gone, it really has gone. There's no other way to access this. But the really clever way about this, once it's all set up, you actually don't need to worry about it too much. It'll just work automatically. Of course, you'll need to update it if items in your budget change, and you'll need to adjust the standing orders in line with that. But having the budget in the first place will make that easier to do. The idea is you're not really having to worry about it. Each week, you've got access to that little pot of spending money, and you can then go and spend it without going overboard.
Yeah, brilliant. And for those who may be listening to this thinking, wow, this sounds really complicated. The first thing to say is, like, your bank, building society, those places will help you, figure some of this stuff out. It really, really will. And there are other places you can get advice, like the Citizens Advice Bureau and us. Like, we literally are committed to come alongside people and help them work through budgets, work through payment plans, figure all some of this out. I'll talk a bit more about that right at the end. But again, you don't need to do this stuff alone. And you may have good friends who've set up these kinds of things that can help you. And again, I know asking for help is always a really tough thing to do. And again, because we can so easily feel this whole shame and guilt thing, surely I should be able to figure this stuff out. But actually, like we need each other. And you may be brilliant at one thing over here that your friend can that you can help your friend with, and maybe you've got a friend or a family member who can help you with this. And so let's be willing to reach out for help in this really, really important area. So we've got we've got a budget in place. We're monitoring that budget. We're using that to evaluate whether we need to cut back, cut costs, or cut out. We're trying to siphon our money off into different accounts so we can manage that. And that really is good advice. I know that, like, if you looked at your bank account without thinking about that, you might think, oh, I got lots of money in, so I can spend, lots of things on clothes or what have you, but actually forgetting that money is going to come out with standing orders and council tax and all that kind of stuff. And so I like what you're suggesting there to help us manage those different pots. What about the fourth tip?
Yeah, so fourth tip is using cash.
Okay.
So, because of course, just having a spending account, it helps keep a lid on our spending, but it doesn't instantly stop extravagant spending. So one way to do this is to use cash. We live very much in a world where we have contactless payments and credit cards, and the act of handing over money and getting less back, and the sense of loss that accompanies it has gone, essentially. It's almost like we're spending pretend money, like in Monopoly. It's just numbers on a screen or on a card. And the idea of using cash, and thus maybe having a cash card only associated with the spending account, means that we can reintroduce that sense of accountability for the money that we are actually spending. Now, I have to obviously caveat this because in these days of COVID, many places are not taking cash at the moment, or had already switched completely over to contactless payment only. But there are still several debit cards that can provide that same sense of accountability. There's one that we use called Monzo, which acts a bit like a debit card, but doesn't have an overdraft, and it allows you to put your spending money into lots of different pots. And you choose which pot you're going to draw the money from for a particular transaction. But otherwise, you use the card as normal, and it makes a little noise, the app, when you spend something, and you can see that pot decreasing. What we're looking for here is just a useful way of training yourself to experience spending money as if it was cash and feeling the loss of handing money over and getting less back.
Yeah, I get that. Which I recognize, could feel like a massive challenge. And ideally, we want to get to a place, and this may take time, when we no longer need an overdraft, and we definitely no longer need credit cards, because like credit card debt can just spiral out of control. I remember years ago listening to someone do a talk about money, and they were saying that if he and his wife went to the cinema and they just bought their cinema tickets, like, I don't know, 20 quid or something, and they put it on the credit card, and then they just paid the minimum amount. With a credit you can pay off the whole thing, but then you can pay the minimum amount each month. It was going to take something like 4 to 5 years to pay off that debt, because interest was being added all the time, and in a sense the debt was always running away, but eventually it would be paid. And so one of the challenges in our culture, and it's kind of natural that like I was a big Queen fan growing up, and you know, one of their famous ones was "I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, and I want it now." And none of us are very good, I think sometimes, maybe not none of us, but a lot of us, me even, at what's called delayed gratification, rather than thinking I'm going to have it now, so I'm going to put it on a credit card or on some credit terms, to actually make the choice, like your previous point, that we're going to save up. And once we've saved up and we've got the money, then we're going to buy it. And actually that's very satisfying to do that then, because you've got no debt, it's all there, it's all paid for. Now listen, again, I understand that is not easy, and some of us watching this right now just may be in a position where we just can't cope without a bit of an overdraft or a bit of a credit card. And again, we don't want anyone to feel guilty or bad about that. All we're saying is we hope we can get to a place, all of us, where we don't need those things, because there'll always be a sense that we're trying to play catch up with our finances. And ultimately what we want to feel is a level of financial freedom, that our outgoings match our incoming. And so yeah, be encouraged around that. Okay, number 5.
Number 5 is give to others. So there are 2 reasons why this is important. Firstly, as we've already briefly talked about at the beginning, we're in this pandemic. There are people who were already struggling financially, who are in even more difficulty now. So I think the statistic, something like 89% increase in the use of food banks in April 2020 compared to the same month in 2019. So clearly a lot of people are really feeling the pinch at this time. So it's really important to remember our communities, to give to others who are less fortunate than ourselves and maybe experiencing hardships that are far greater than our own at this time. The second reason is more of a psychological argument. See, because by giving some of our income away, we start to release the hold it can have on us. And it helps us to remember that there are things more important than the trainers we buy or the car we can afford. I think it can help us give perspective on what's important in our lives. So whatever form of giving you might choose, be it to a charity or to a local church or whatever, it's still important, though, that we factor this in as an expenditure in our budget and make sure things still balance. But it could be a good way to sort of almost free us a little bit from the hold it can have on us.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because like we live, particularly in the West, in such a hugely consumeristic world.
Yes.
Where we're told that, you know, to feel good about ourselves, we need to look right, we need to have the right stuff, the right house, the right car, and all those things. And the pressure that puts on all of us to live beyond our means, to buy a car that maybe is more expensive than we can really afford to insure and to run, or to have a mortgage, and we get caught in the rat race, you know, of just like bigger cars, and we get a salary increase and bigger debt, and it's so easy, like for all of us, for me, to be lost in some of this stuff. And I guess there's an opportunity to break free and actually say, like money is really, really important. There's no doubt about it. Like, you know, it's fundamental to our existence in terms of being able to buy stuff and being able to have, but actually life is also about relationships and investing in other people and being invested in and being other centered. And there are some things that perhaps trump the role that money plays in our life in the pursuit of possessions and stuff. And so I think that when we give, as you say, it kind of challenges that cultural view about having and shifts it to think about actually the real joy there can be in giving. Like when my 2 sons were growing up, and we gave them a little bit of pocket money, we tried to encourage them to embrace the 3 S's. And still today, I think they're still good. And they're essentially what you're saying, that when it comes to our money, we should spend some, we should save some, and we should share some. Spend some, share some, and save some. And sometimes we can't do much of that because we may be financially stretched. But thinking, particularly going back to our first point about preparing a budget, obviously we got to spend some. If we can even save a little bit, maybe for a more difficult day, or to buy a sofa or something that we need, but also to make a commitment to live generously, to help other people, and knowing that actually from a mental health point of view, that's going to do us good. like kindness really pays off. Generosity really, really pays off. So, Paul, as we start to bring this to a close, any other kind of final thoughts for you that you want to share?
Yeah, well, just to say that, you know, I mean, obviously, I hope that these tips are useful, but if they do seem scary, or even if you're worried about things like debt, there are loads of organisations, as you mentioned before, which can help. I mean, Zeo Church in particular is part of the Christians Against Poverty, or CAP network, which, as well as helping people who are in debt and actually sort of, for example, speaking to someone's creditors on behalf of them to arrange a payment plan that is actually achievable and affordable. It can also provide things like the money course I mentioned right at the top, which can help people develop budgets and improve their finances long before it ever gets serious. So if it does feel like a lot, some of these things, the CAP Money course in particular is very good at actually sort of guiding you step by step through this stuff, and helping you develop it, answer any questions you have as you go through. So you know, you're really not by yourself at any point in this.
Yeah. And again, we really want to encourage people in that. You know, I've been grateful for people in my life or professionals who have helped me really think through my budget, how I'm tracking against it, my savings, you know, what I'm giving to, challenging me sometimes in my use of expenditure, and you know, we need people around us that help us do that. And as Paul says, like as a church, Zeo, we want to be a help and support and encouragement in this area. And so whatever your faith background, we you know, it's immaterial to us whether you have any interest in God at all. We just want to help people become financially healthy. And so if you need some help today with guiding you more detail on some of the things we've talked about, if you are in debt and you can't see any way out, working with us, we promise you we can help you become clear of debt. Even just literally a couple of weeks ago, we saw a guy that we've been working with as part of our Christians Against Poverty work, who'd been massively in debt, tens of thousands of pounds in debt, worked with us with CAP, came up with a payment plan, and a couple of weeks ago was debt free. And just the joy and the pressure just that lifted off was just wonderful. And we want to see people become debt free. We want to see people basically thriving in this area. And so if we can help you, please reach out to us. If you go to our website, zeochurch.com/connect, zeochurch.com/connect, you can leave your contact details. You can give us a note. Like, I'd like to find out more about the CAP Money course. I'd like to find out more about the debt management, or I need, you know, like you may be listening to this and basically like you really are struggling, and you've not even got enough food in the cupboard. We want to help. Like, you know, maybe you got a tough bill and you're not sure how you can pay it. Please reach out to us, and we will do everything we can to provide some encouragement, some support, and some hope and help into what you're going through. We have had a question that's come through from the chat about whether there are phone apps or mobile apps that can help people budget their stuff. I do have one on my phone, actually. I can't remember what it's called. Paul, do you know any good apps that are good for this kind of stuff?
I personally use something called Microsoft Money.
Okay.
On my desktop rather than my phone, but a lot of the CAP tools which you get through doing the CAP course are all available on a mobile site as well as a desktop site. It does like the addition for you and that sort of thing. So there are tools that are available through doing courses like the one that we run, but there are many more.
Yeah, and I know, you know, obviously we're not particularly advertising any particular thing, but I know on my phone I have something called an app called Money Hub. And there'll be many apps like Money Hub. But what Money Hub does, it allows you to set a budget and stuff, but it actually connects with your accounts. And so it will track against your accounts, your budget. So Money Hub's a great little app. There are many others, I'm sure, out there. But use those websites, you know, Money Supermarket, Money Saving Expert like Martin Lewis, you know, all of those things, you know, get his weekly tips. There's so much resource out there to help us do this stuff really, really well. Well, listen, Paul, I'm so grateful to you. You may be a Mars robot engineer, but I know you are passionate about seeing people financially healthy too.
Definitely.
And so I want to thank you for this simple, practical things that we can do. And we hope you found this helpful tonight. We want to encourage you not to allow guilt and shame around money issues to stop you from reaching out for help. We feel deeply for you. Because we've all, like I shared right at the start, we've all had issues in this area. I have, and I can easily do it again. And so let's not stand alone. There are people who care about you. We're people of faith. We believe God cares about you. That may seem like a totally crazy thing to say. And actually, the Bible has a lot to say about money. God wants to see us financially thrive. But that's it for tonight as we've thought about the subject of money pressures. I hope to hear from some people. Do reach out to us at zeochurch.com/connect. Next week, as I mentioned right at the start, is our final session in this 5-week series. And if you are a parent out there and you've been just basically in this extraordinary season of parenting in this new reality, you've been homeschooling, you've been basically under incredible pressure. You're amazing. We think you're incredible, but you'd appreciate some help, some wisdom, some advice, some comfort to know that you're not alone in the challenging of parenting in pandemic times. Then do connect with us next week, 7:30. We've got the brilliant Becca and Steve Legg, who are going to be with us, hoping to encourage us, inspire us in our parenting. But for now, God bless. Thanks for joining us and hope to see you next week.